From Miami Law, I'm Annette Uguez, and this is The Explainer.
There are major changes afoot in terms of processing immigrants.
The U.S. has seen increasing numbers of children presenting at the southern border over the past few years, either with family or without. Thousands of children have and will be shuttled into camps or a patchwork of foster agencies across the country. Even in the best examples, the children suffer from being separated from their families or people they know. Today on our show, we're with Bernard Perlmutter, director of the Children and Youth Law Clinic, to talk about how we got here and where we're going. Let's go to Explainer producer Catherine Skibb for the interview.
Good morning, Bernie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start with the caravan that's caused the most division. Many of those children are not likely to make it all the way to the U.S., but let's talk about those who do. What'll that look like?
Well, it's going to be a chaotic scenario, without any doubt. We don't know the exact numbers of children who will make it all the way to a border crossing or will be apprehended between ports of entry, but it will be, one could easily say and characterize it as organized chaos.
And UNICEF had said there are as many as 2,300 children in the caravan that left Guatemala in mid-October. What do those kinds of numbers look like as opposed to what they normally get on a day or in a month?
If all 2,300 children were to be presenting themselves to U.S. authorities at the border, then this will be a large, a number of children, without any doubt. There are major changes afoot in terms of processing immigrants from the caravan and from other sources at border points and between border entry points on the long U.S.-Mexico border. There's no doubt that there's going to be a lot of challenges faced by these young people, their parents, individuals who are not parts of families who are entering. And that's why I called it earlier organized chaos. It's going to be a very chaotic scene added to the normal stresses at the border. Of course, we have 5,000 U.S. troops deployed at the border doing God knows what. They're completely, outside of their normal mission. And so will that inflame? Will that pacify an already difficult and potentially troubling situation at the border? We don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We had a huge wave of children come in under Obama, and we've had an earlier wave of children coming in during the Trump administration. Is there a difference in how those two groups have been processed, or how children presenting at the border have been processed under the two administrations?
Yeah, some very significant differences. I mean, first, we have to sort of keep in mind that the current administration is a wall-building, anti-immigrant, hostile to legal and illegal immigration entry into the U.S. anywhere it happens. So the wall-building rhetoric that this administration got elected on and has been campaigning on endlessly, that's very different than what we saw before. Now, under the Obama, the predecessor administration, undoubtedly there was a robust deportation removal policy that was created and implemented during the Obama years, but it had a more human face to it and a less hostile anti-immigration face to it. So to give one example that relates to children at the border, we saw in 2014 a spike of children entering from three countries in Central America, the so-called Northern Triangles, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. We saw, and the Obama administration reacted, maybe overreacted, but they saw that this was a potential. They didn't call it invasion, like the current administration refers to it, but they saw this as a challenge to managing our borders. And so there were policies that the administration was forced to implement that was designed to process children at the border in as humane a way as possible, and at the same time to send a message to other children seeking or thinking about entering this country in this manner. And so there was a sort of a policy of deterrence. But the Obama administration had to follow a pre-existing body of law, jurisprudence. And they did so imperfectly at times, but the primary source of the policy that binds the U.S. with respect to the processing of children at the border is a 21-year-old settlement agreement. Now it's 21 years old. It was entered into in 1997. It's the Flores versus Reno federal class action, national federal class action that sets forth certain protocols for how to process children at the border, primarily and initially unaccompanied children, but now it relates to children accompanied by parents or guardians at the border. And the basic premise of Flores that has existed for all these years is that children cannot be kept in secure detention for longer than a few weeks, 20 days. And so they may very well be kept in cages for a certain period of time, as it were, maintained at the border by Border Patrol and by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But less restrictive forms of detention have to be used in those instances. And so the Flores settlement, which the Obama administration was dutifully following, says that children have to be placed in federal foster care settings and the like, and eventually, and not for over long periods of time, and then released to sponsors, if not parents, other family members or other trustworthy adults. Mm-hmm. Trump administration, by contrast, wants to just sort of wipe it off the map. They want to eliminate Flores. They want to, through their zero tolerance rhetoric and policy that they're attempting to push and the like, they are seeking to eviscerate all of the protections that have allowed children to come into the U.S., make a case for whatever immigration relief they can make a case for, whether it's political asylum or some other form of humanitarian relief. And that's now very much up in the air and being questioned deeply by the immigration policy team in the West Wing.
Mm-hmm. So after the initial caging of the children from the last caravan, what's been happening in the last, let's say, month to children that are presenting at the border? Are they being treated differently than that earlier group? Will they be treated differently than the children that may be arriving with the present caravan?
Well, I'm going to assume that that the administration is going to do everything that it can through executive powers that it has as it flexes its muscles in that realm to work a policy up that allows the federal government to indefinitely detain children in facilities that are managed by the different federal agencies that are charged with the care of these children. It's hard to predict exactly what form or shape it's going to ultimately have. There are proposed regulations on a number of fronts, both procedural and substantive, that are being put forward by the administration. But the idea of the motivations of the impetus behind everything is to say no and to turn a cold shoulder to these children.
Let me just understand this. So let's say 2,000 children make it to the border. We have to hear their claims, so we have to let them in. So we are letting them into the country and putting them in these facilities. We're not stopping at the border and go, no, turn around, go home. So they have some legal protections at that point because they're now in the United States custody, correct?
They have very limited legal protections, but let's say a child utters the magic words to an immigration officer, political asylum. That has to be investigated, has to be vetted by the officer. There are standards that apply, and this is where the Trump administration is drastically different than all of the prior administrations, including Obama. The new policy that has issued from on high is you can only make your case, you can only articulate those words at a port of entry. You're forbidden from being able to assert that claim somewhere between a port of entry. So it's either Tijuana or bust, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so if you are able to articulate a credible fear of persecution on account of one of the 5 factors enumerated in the Immigration and Nationality Act, race, nationality, political opinion, membership in a social group, and the like, then it has to be tested in a different way than in the past. So credible fear was the prior standard for vetting a claim of asylum. Now it's reasonable fear. So the standards are being ratcheted up. The grounds for political asylum are being narrowed also. There's new DOJ policy that former Attorney General Sessions issued. And so it's much, much, much harder to even be able to remain here, to be able to make a case before an immigration judge and have a fair hearing on a claim for asylum than it was in the past.
Miami, for instance, absorbed 125,000 Cubans after the Mariel boat lift. So what does that mean to a community? Can other communities easily absorb these caravans of immigrants?
Well, the numbers, of course, the scale is much less. Maybe 7,000, 8,000 persons started out in the caravan in Honduras. Perhaps a fraction of that will land somewhere along the border, whether it's at a port of entry or between those points of entry. It won't be on the scale of the 125,000. I mean, I want to put to the lot, I want to sort of rebut as strongly as I can this notion that there's an invasion. They're mostly families, children, parents, a lot of single men, undoubtedly, of different nationalities, most from Central America, but not exclusively from Central America, contrary to the campaign rally kind of rhetoric that we heard endlessly and tirelessly a few weeks ago. There's no evidence whatsoever of saboteurs or ISIS or Mideasterners infiltrating. No, and George Soros isn't masterminding all of this. So we have to sort of keep this within boundaries of plausible, sort of fact-based logic and reason. And so the numbers are going to be much smaller than they ever were, and certainly every case will have to be presented. Every individual and every family that presents to the board will have to be assessed on their own merits. I suspect that the vast majority will be turned back.
Well, that sort of segues us into the midterm elections. Is that going to change the balance of our immigration policy? I mean, we've had 2 years of Stephen Miller and Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions. So with the Democrats controlling the House, are they going to be able to kind of ratchet us back to where we were before?
I don't see us, even with a government partly in the hands of the opposition party, that we're going to have any kind of immigration relief on a grand scale. Those days are long behind us. We lost those opportunities in the middle of the Obama years, and I certainly don't see while there may be some pushback and some questioning and oversight from the Democratic House, that there will be, and in the real, that there will be a legislative push that really equals what's going on from the executive branch. Now, the judicial branch is something else. And so thankfully, the ACLU and other advocacy organizations across the country have been not shy about challenging every obnoxious policy that emanates from the administration within hours of things being issued by executive fiat or whatever means. And so that's really where I hope, even in the cases of Trump appointments in the federal judiciary, that there will be some questioning and some oversight, serious judicial oversight over executive branch policy.
There's hope. Of all the children that have come through during the Trump administration, are you all seeing them here, working with them at the clinic?
Our clinic, the Children and Youth Law Clinic, does represent a fair number of immigrant children. Most of our clients that we represent are children who come through the border like their younger siblings, perhaps, who are part of the caravan today and will eventually present themselves to the U.S. authorities. But our clients benefited from the prior administration's comparative humanitarian face and policy. So many of the clients that we represent were released to family members or other sponsors. They have become integrated to some degree in our community, and many of them have ongoing cases that are allowing them to petition for ultimate immigration relief through, interestingly, the state dependency court as special immigrant juveniles. Mm-hmm. So that's what we do day to day. We have not had much involvement in the children locally who have been held in detention at a large facility that was reopened in Homestead. Mm-hmm. It can house up to 1,000 children, and it's run by a large for-profit company that contracts with the Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security. At any given time, there are several hundred children housed there. So those children are kind of out of sight and out of mind. The media hasn't been able to visit the facility. I don't know about other lawyers in the community who represent immigrant children. My colleagues at the Americans for Immigrant Justice and Catholic Charities Legal Services may have some limited access to those children to be able to assist them in making claims for political asylum or other kinds of immigration relief. But this is one of the largest facilities that's housing these children at the present time in the country. And so there is some concern about what happens, one day when they're going to be able to leave that facility, if ever. And where will they go? And where will they live? And with whom will they live? And how will they be integrated into our communities in this state and other parts of the country?
Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, we are, this is undoubtedly, and everybody knows, this is one of the most, this is one of the key ways to inflame one segment of our population. The fear of people from other countries. It was a big part of the last election. It will remain front and center for many, many people in the electorate. But I think we have to sort of look at this through law and policy in a reasonable way, not be fearing and be understanding. We're a country that's guided by those beautiful words of Emma Lazarus. We should be true to those. But I'm quite pessimistic that current policy is even close to maintaining any fidelity to the poetry of Emma Lazarus.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Explainer as we close out our first season. We're grateful to our listeners and the crew here at Miami Law that helps us put this together. We will be back with you in January as we drop season 2 with new issues, new guests, and new intro music thanks to Ray D. Kim, a composer at the Frost School of Music. Today's show was brought to you by Miami Law's joint degree programs with dozens of offerings from JD MBAs and JD MDS to JD LLMs, including arts, sports, music, and environmental science and policy. For more information, visit law.miami.edu. Happy holidays, everyone.